Hi, my name is Michael Ramoser, and welcome to another installation of the Publishers series from Seattle Business Magazine. Family business is the backbone of the American economy, the glue that holds communities together, and it would not be a stretch to say the essence of the American dream. We recently asked two of the foremost family business experts on the West Coast to join us in the studio. Christian Schiller, a managing director of Cascadia Capital, and Rich Simmonds, co-founder of the Pacific Family Business Institute. We think you'll enjoy their conversation. Let's take a look.
So Christian, we're here today with a great family business audience. I think the place we ought to start is to have you give us an update on the mergers and acquisition markets.
Well, it's been interesting times, Rich. Certainly, I've done this kind of a one-trick pony, 21 years of being an investment banker to family business, and we are really riding a peak like we've never seen before. Our business, in terms of new engagements this year, is up over 50% over last year. Last year was another record year for the firm, and the year before that was quite good as well, too. And so we really are riding this peak of hot market activity, high valuations, wealth of options for family businesses to look at, as we'll talk about, not just selling, but a lot across the board on capital raising, debt, a lot of different options as well too for those that don't want to sell. But it's a very strong market.
So how's it compared to a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago?
Really, the main change for family business specifically is the rise of private equity. And so to compare and contrast, what usually was the case is a family business had a trade-off. They either could sell to a strategic or a competitor at the highest valuation, and then they would have social concerns over the competitor closing their operation or moving or firing employees. And private equity was always way below in valuation, 20, 30, 40%. And now what's changed is private equity is winning about half of our deals. And the valuations are on par with strategic buyers, or a lot of times, surprisingly, they're higher. Wow. So that changes a lot in the last couple of years, really, in terms of family businesses have been able to have different kinds of decisions that they've never really had in the last 20 years that I've done this, where they can get a very strong valuation, but also focus on qualitative things that matter to them on the private equity side, because they can structure things that are less than 100% buyout, take care of their people, ensure the business remains independent, which is important if they live in a small town. So it's kind of have your cake and eat it too type of market in the last couple of years.
That's great. So, it sounds like the market's changed significantly. How does that impact the advice you would give to, a family business owning client that you would work with today?
It's really, I think, on that private equity thing that I said, a lot of family businesses have had fear of the big bad wolf, I call it, of private equity, because they read Barbarians at the Gate about KKR and taking over companies and tearing them apart over the years. And so the main thing that it's changed our advice is to try to get clients to really be open to considering not just one path, but many paths, and to get the market data points around each of those paths. And so then you can make a more fully informed decision as a family based on real market data, as opposed to predisposing and saying, I want to sell to that company. And if you do that, you end up with a deal that would be at half the valuation potentially, or things might, you might open your eyes to these amazing opportunities that are out there in this market that people don't look at unless you really do open up a process, look at a variety of options.
Interesting. So from a family business owner's standpoint, if you were to kind of walk in their shoes, how are they looking at this market? Favorably, or is this a market they're choosing to get excited about and sell into, or what's on the mind of the family business owner?
Yeah, I think to do that, I'd stage that really quickly. Back in 2007 and 8, a lot of family businesses wanted to sell. And then they held on because they said, my business is always going to be worth more next year. And then we went through 2009 and 10. So this cycle around, we see family businesses much more around just facing the reality that this is the hottest market they'll find. They want to do it now. Obviously, as we'll talk about later, there's lots of family businesses, and the vast majority don't want to sell. But for those that are in that mindset about selling, I'm seeing them make those decisions more affirmatively sooner and acting very, very quickly, especially with the downturn that we had in the summer in the public markets when the Dow went from 18,000 to 15,000. And that really caused a lot of people to start to act and move because they were, I think, somewhat fearful that we're at the peak, or at least, taking a reality that we're riding the peak.
Yeah, we're going to have another recession. So that's a great segue. It seems like, while there are family businesses that are interested in selling their business, the vast majority of family businesses, at least that we see, are interested in building a thriving family business that will be around for generations to come. And in those cases, the family business owner that maybe doesn't want to sell today, what are the services that Cascadia can bring to the table?
Well, I think, and that's one of the great things about our relationship and the relationship with other family business advisors, is we view ourselves within an ecosystem of family business advice. And like you and I have talked a lot about, it's really about getting that holistic 360-degree viewpoint of all advisors working together for the family. So if they want to sell, we are the primary driver of that. If they don't want to sell, then we work with people like you, with their attorneys, estate attorneys, their accountants, their other family business advisors, to really try to figure out what they do want to do. And then the services that we provide in that, we're not consultants, we don't charge for that, but we really try to set up other alternatives. If you don't want to sell, what else can you do for the benefit of the family, for the benefit of the business? And we'll talk about it here in a second, but there's just a lot of opportunity out there.
So talk about it. A lot of every 30 or 40 years, there's a transition from the senior generation to the next generation, transition of both leadership and ownership. Kind of specifically, how does your firm help?
Really a couple ways. One is back to the private equity side, and this isn't necessarily selling. So back to that qualitative thing, private equity can do minority deals. You can do debt transfer transactions. So let's say that your bank won't fund a transaction. We can help with non-bank debt funds that will provide for capital for one generation to buy out the next, sisters to buy out brothers. I'm doing a deal right now, in fact, where there's two sisters that want to sell, two brothers that don't, and we're working on a debt funded deal, non-bank debt funding, because a lot of the banks can't really fund enough capital to pay out the selling shareholders. There's ESOPs that we can get involved with in financing ESOPs, where you can sell to an ESOP and have that succession. There's other things that we work, and this is where we work together with advisors like you and others around payment over terms. So you do a kind of an internal sale, and then the selling shareholders take a note back, and you structure a payment over time. And there's just a lot of different interesting ways to look at things that are not selling.
So, that's great to hear, because one of the things we run into, as you mentioned, frequently is, as family businesses transition from generation to generation, the number of family members increases exponentially.
Right.
And, on a frequent basis, there's a family member that just doesn't really, their dream is something else. Their passion is something else. So it's great to hear that you can help with the financing. Sometimes, and maybe it's from the families that haven't, considered private equity, but sometimes we kind of run across a concern that has to do, if I bring in outside capital, I'm going to lose control.
Right.
So from a family business owner standpoint, how have you kind of helped families to deal with that?
This is one of the most exciting things we've launched, is a private capital merchant banking business. And it kind of takes us back to the days of the 1970s, when investment banks like us, the Lazards, the Rothschilds, would essentially help wealthy families to invest in family business. And so about a year ago, we hired John Amato and Felix Hurley, who had run the Agnelli family fund out of the Italy Fiat and Ferrari family money. Sure. And they moved out here, John Amato moved out here. And essentially what we're doing there is for families that don't want institutional grade private equity, institutional money that's very fixed, because these are funds that can do certain things, and it's about that fund's criteria. We essentially inverted it and said that we can look at what a family wants in terms of capital and then put that together with family money. So that's the most interesting thing. It's not funds, it's not institutional, it's essentially families investing in families. And then we source the money from wealthy families, because as you know today, everybody's looking for yield. It's hard to find. And so there's plenty of options of families trying to find yield to invest in family companies, and connecting those dots is what our private capital merchant banking is about. And when you do that, it's a lot more passive capital. You can structure it in ways that the family can remain in full control, and you get rid of a lot of those institutional control issues that really concern families sometimes.
I think you're kind of hitting on an area that we're fascinated by. A lot of the research that we're doing over the last couple of years would suggest that, third, fourth, fifth gen family businesses are trying to kind of diversify out of just one operating business. They're going from family business and maybe enterprising family. And, for lots of reasons, maybe the old business is just not a business they want to be in this competitive environment, world economy. So in the case of those families that are looking to, if you will, diversify their family assets so that instead of one operating business, maybe they've got 3 or 4 or 5, how does Cascadia help?
A variety of ways there. One could be that they could invest in our private capital deals.
Okay.
So we've talked to a lot of the kind of wealthy family company, family office types. If they don't have an official family office with people that actually run their money and can do the due diligence and all it takes, they can invest in Cascadia's deals to invest in families directly and diversify that way. We have a real estate group run by Jamie Boyd, one of my partners, and they could do real estate deals. It depends if they're in the real estate business, and then it's not diversification, but a lot of companies, as you know, operating companies in consumer products or that do diversify through real estate.
Sure.
There's certainly venture capital and other types of technology types of deals. Some families like that risk profile, some don't. They could buy companies through us in a different industry so that they could create, kind of like the Graham family's done, with John Graham and that, and basically created a family office holding company, or, Laird Norton has looked at doing that around buying diversified companies and holding them that way. The Joshua Green family, with what Stan McCammon's doing and things like that. So having families start to then buy family companies that are not in their industry is another really fascinating way to diversify.
So Christian, we're going to wrap up our session today. Do you have any last minute words of wisdom for the families that have joined us today?
Well, thanks, Rich. Yeah, it's been a great session. So the main advice that we're giving to families today is, given this incredible peak market and all these 360 degrees of options, is basically it's okay to do nothing, but you shouldn't do nothing without looking at those options, talking about them as a family, talking them with some of your employees or key other decision makers, advisors, thinking about your community, thinking about how you can really maximize value for the family, maximize value for other constituencies, and explore selling, buying, raising capital, raising debt, ESOP, internal family succession planning. If you end up looking at all those 360 degrees of options and doing nothing, but you're fully informed and you make that proactive decision as a family, that's a great thing to do. But again, given we're in this nearly epic cycle of all these incredible options out there, if you do it without really exploring that, I think that's something that isn't as beneficial for your family and your long-term value of your business and your other constituencies.
So Christian, on behalf of the family businesses that have showed up today, thanks again for taking the time to join us.
Hey, thanks too, Rich. Really appreciate you
You bet.
for doing this together.